What up, dude?
What up, bro?
Guess who I just got off the phone with?
Who?
I got a call from the course manager at Shea Hallam Golf Course in Portland, Oregon, and they said a man with a mustache that looks strikingly like Andrew Schultz is banned from their course permanently for the terrors he committed on the group in front of him. Not me. Don't blame me.
Oh shit! They may ban me just from Oregon state lines now if it's that bad of an offense. Honestly, with my golf swing, that ban doesn't surprise me.
It was rumored, but now it's been confirmed that you completely disregarded the conservation wildlife area on the right side of every single fairway.
This I can confirm. I'm not even going to try and cover that one up. All right. So this past weekend, for you guys listening and are like, what the hell are these guys talking about? We did a surprise trip to Portland, Oregon. Scott's brother Peter lives there, and a couple other of his family members. We've all been good buddies for a very long time, and we did a quick. Mine was about 48 hours, Friday to Sunday. You were there a little bit longer, but made a great trip out of it. Golfed a full 18 on Saturday. Look, I went into the weekend saying this up front, that I was going to be the team hype man. I'm not there for a pretty swing. I'm not there for pretty shots. I'll hit a solid putt or two or three. Short game's pretty good. But I was going in there certified hype man. And obviously alcohol was involved.
If Cade got a discount off his strokes with the amount of drinks he can have, I think you'd be a very competitive player. I think the U.S. Open's coming up. You may be a contender.
I'm going to put in an official change to the rules there just to see if I can get myself on a little primetime television, baby. Oh,
All right. Enough messing around. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the Pursuit of Property podcast, the online version. We have derailed as we've gone online. There's something about the Cade being at home that leads to unprofessionalism. But Cade, you are leading us off this week. Last week we had a great discussion about sales. We said that we were going to have monthly discussions about operations as well. So fill us in. I mean, what are we talking about?
yeah. Let's give a state of the business right now on the operational side and some of the challenges. I think what's important to note here too, and we were just talking about this as a team, is the sales side of the business is ever evolving. There are a ton of moving pieces, continuous improvement. We talked about one of our core values, which is Kaizen, which does mean that continuous improvement. The operational side's a little bit different. I feel like systems, processes, financials, there's more of a science to the operational side of a business than there is to sales. Now, that does not mean it comes without its challenges, and with those challenges, a pullback of the curtain to show you where the struggles are happening and what needs to be improved. And right now, one of the biggest challenges that we're having, and it's a little bit on the acquisition escrow side in terms of our wholesale deals, but I really want to focus on our fully done projects. Fix and flips are done, ready to go. They get listed. We're getting offers fairly quickly on our projects that are priced correctly in decent enough neighborhoods and in a good price point. But we're seeing the majority of our sale escrows drag out. What we really like to do on the sales side, and I think this, or on the operation side, when we are selling a property, is we always look for the offer that can close quicker than the other ones. And so traditionally what we've thought of is an escrow is going to last traditionally 30 days. And that's what a lot of us have dealt with. If you've bought or sold a home, that's what you're dealing with. If you're an investor, you're probably familiarized with 30-day escrows. But when we're selling our flips, we are pushing for 21 days or sooner. And those reasons are more than a few. The most important one being, if we're getting multiple offers, or even if we're at one offer, we want that cash back into the account as quickly as possible. The cash conversion cycle for a flip is a lot longer than that of a wholesale. And so if we're able to save a few days here on the rehab, and then save a few days here by, scheduling photos a little bit earlier to get the home listed sooner, and then push for a little bit of a quicker escrow when we sell the property, those days add up, especially if you compound them project after project. So our goal is to decrease that cash conversion cycle, make it shorter on these longer term projects. Now,
wait, I want to jump in.
Yeah.
I want to jump in real quick. You've got a thought, so don't lose it. Double click on a cash conversion cycle and why it's even important. Because I know that this podcast is now more aimed towards more experienced people, but even experienced people may not be fully aware of why a cash conversion cycle is important.
Very simplified version of a cash conversion cycle is answering the question, from when a dollar is spent, how quickly that dollar comes back. And so when we think about a wholesale, you spend the money on the marketing, you get the deal, and in a wholesale, you're never owning the property. You're assigning your interest to another buyer. And typically that cash is coming back in 30 days or less from when you sign the contract. Now a flip, that's traditionally going to take 3 to 6 months as opposed to 30 days or less from the day you sign the contract. And so a cash conversion cycle, how quickly from when you spend that dollar is that dollar coming back into the business? And so when we talk about that cash conversion cycle, that's what I'm talking about on the fix and flip side, how we want to shorten that timeline to bring the cash back in so we can then spend that cash on more marketing dollars to bring in the next deal. And it's this cycle, goes in a circle, cash conversion cycle.
Yeah, I think I want to add 2 points to that. Everybody gets caught on ROI, which is important because the amount of money you get back from the dollar you spend is important. If you're not getting more than $1 back, then it's not worth spending the dollar. But people forget about cash conversion cycle. And you ever see the big projects that go belly up? It's almost always because of a cash flow issue. These guys buying massive deals, they're not stupid. But sometimes the deal makes sense on paper, but in practice, especially like our business, we're not a huge company. But if we have 30 or 40 projects going at a time that we're borrowing money on, that's a lot of money every month going out. You need revenue coming back in quickly. So you'll hear Cade talk about cash conversion cycle and ROI. Those are two very different measurements. One's about how much money did you make, and the other is how soon did you make it so that you don't go belly up in the process of making this big return. And sometimes what you find is the ROI goes down the shorter the cash conversion cycle. And flips, we know, tend to make more than a wholesale deal, but they take longer. So you have to, when you're doing a flip, you have to think, do I have the funds to maintain this deal to its completion to get that money? If you don't, then you need to wholesale it, even if it makes less. Just something to consider.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think, again, a lot of these big financial terms are thrown around and like to get flexed when people don't really know the true meaning behind each of those terms and why they're important. So as we're talking about these issues that we're experiencing, right? Again, to preface, on most of our fix and flip projects, when we go to sell them, we're pushing for a 21-day escrow or sooner. And let's talk about the things that are in our control. One is communication. From our ops team to our listing agent to our contractors, we can be as diligent as possible in communicating with the buyer, with the lender, with escrow, with title. So that's one of the things that we pride ourselves in, is over communicating. Okay? Things that are out of our control. How the buyer reacts, what the buyer's got going on behind the scenes, the listing or the buyer's agent, we can't control their emotions or what they're going to say or this, that, and the other, right? And so I'll name off a few of the examples and challenges that we've had in projects that we've either recently just closed out or that we're in escrow to sell right now. First and foremost being solar. And so solar is interesting because there's quite a different ways a solar system can work on a property. The solar system can be completely owned, free and clear. The seller or we do not owe a loan balance on it. Those panels are producing. Everything's good to go. Okay. There's then an owned system that still has a loan balance on it. Okay. And traditionally that loan balance is either going to be inherited by you when you buy the flip or purchase the property to rehab it, or it may be paid off by the seller in escrow. And then the other one, I'm just going to blank this into a solar lease, a power purchase agreement, some type of leased solar system where there's this existential third party, the solar company. Okay. And when you got to deal with solar, you have to transfer the title or the ownership of that solar. You then have to put that through title. It takes a collaboration piece between all parties involved. And so one of these most recent deals we did, the company, unfortunately was Sunrun. And funny enough, it's the company I use to just put solar on my house. And, everything's gone smooth. But on this particular property, shit was not great. And so what was originally signed as a 21-day escrow, we did not figure out that there were issues with the solar until literally probably day 14 or 15. And at this point, we're a week away from closing. We now have to figure out, okay, how do we transfer the system to the buyer? Where is this solar paperwork from the initial escrow? What are the panels producing? What the hell is even going on with this solar system? Okay. And what was supposed to be a 21-day escrow, I think ended up closer to 45 days. And so learning lesson number one from our end on the ops team is, and Scott, you and I it was this particular deal that kind of breeded this discussion point between us, is how can we improve getting all of those details up front? And then when they're handed to us on the ops team, we need to know those details so that when we go to sell the property, everything is seamless and we can start that on day 0 of acceptance. And that was the issue on this property, was us on the ops team, we were responsible for the solar and we had no clue what was going on. And we get to, a week or less before closing, and this can of worms just opens up completely. And so I think that has been one of the issues that has dragged out our flip selling. One of the other issues has just been not setting clear enough expectations with the buyer. I'll use another example of a property that we're selling. Up front, we knew that we were accepting an offer that was utilizing down payment assistance. Okay. And for down payment assistance, that's if Scott has a house, I want to buy it. I'm buying Scott's house, but I don't have enough funds to put down as a down payment for my loan. There are several programs, organizations, lending products that give you that down payment assistance, self-explanatory. But typically, those down payment assistance programs do not work quickly. So we signed this as a 21-day escrow. We felt, based on the communication from the buyer's agent and the lender, that everything was in tip-top shape. Down payment assistance was ready to go. They felt confident they can close in 21 days. And here we are again in a scenario where when something was supposed to close in 21 days, this deal is now closing ideally sometime early next week. And we're going to be again around that 45-day mark. And here, I think the issue, again, talk about controllables versus uncontrollables. What we can control is our level of communication with the agent. We knew what we were getting into up front and the lender. We knew the status of the down payment. But what was out of our control is how long this is going to take. And so the issue and the problem that the ops team made was going into this thing completely thinking this was going to close in 21 days, when realistically we should have set expectations within our team that, hey, we're signing this for 21 days in good faith, but we've got to expect this thing is probably in reality going to take 30 plus days, just because we know how long down payment assistance takes. And that was the first domino to fall that we then had to go back and fix all of these problems, because we're using that 21-day projection to close escrow to utilize the private money lender funds on that deal and rotate them into another deal that we're purchasing. Now that delays our purchase escrow from the acquisitions team on a deal that they signed. And now they're having to have difficult conversations with the seller that, hey, I know we were supposed to close this week, but hey, we're waiting on funds from this other deal and we're really not sure when it's going to close. That's a very unprofessional conversation to have, and it doesn't reflect well on us as a company. And so what some of these learning lessons that I've learned on the operational side is we can't put all of our eggs in one basket, especially when we're utilizing funds from a deal that we're selling to purchase a new property from you guys on the acquisitions team. There has to be a plan B, a plan C, and honestly, probably even a plan D, because we know that the state of this business, things aren't going to go perfectly. They rarely do. And that's a string and a domino effect that affects not only some of these other deals that we have, that affects when we can close and purchase new properties, but then it affects our grand scheme of our cash flow forecast. And our cash flow forecast is basically us and the company looking and saying, okay, here are all of the deals we're buying. Here are all of our deals that are under rehab. Here are all of our wholesales, and here are all of the properties that we're selling. How much revenue are we anticipating from those deals? And when are we anticipating those deals to close? And so we've then seen, and I wouldn't even classify this as an ops thing. This is just higher level leadership type thing in a business where we have to look at this and say, why is all of this money that we thought was coming in April, where's all the money? Well, we had this deal get delayed on the listing because of the solar. We had another listing delay because of down payment assistance. We had a wholesale deal delay because of title issues. All of these things then roll over to the next month, and now you're sitting there at the end of April or beginning of May going, fuck, where'd all the money go? It's great that we now think this is coming in May, but if we thought it was coming in April, what's guaranteeing we're going to see that money in May? And it's not going to roll over again into June. And so that's a very long story short in some of the operational issues that we're dealing with on some of our resale properties and why it's affecting our overall broad cash flow forecast, our KPIs that we need to hit in terms of deals closed. And then obviously our one of our biggest numbers is the revenue goal we're trying to hit. And so those are a lot of the big issues we're dealing with on the operational side right
now. What stands out to me when I'm hearing your guys' decision making on the sales side is, and I'm not known for being wildly shy with you guys, I'll say how I see it. I think it's a dumb idea to push for a 21-day close at the price point we're typically selling at to the buyers we're typically selling to. And I don't think you should weigh the 7-day difference as viable. I personally would not have suggested to take a higher offer with down payment assistance, regardless if it was higher. I don't think I've ever done a deal with down payment assistance that closed the way that it started. So that would be my first take. The second take, I think you're absolutely right. And the sales team, we've had to make an adjustment on how we handle solar. And we have an active deal right now where I genuinely think a seller is going to lose his home to solar because he is so wishy-washy about if we're doing the deal or not, and has an auction date that's nearly 2 weeks out. And you and I both know solar companies move at their own pace.
Yep.
I think what stands out to me is the process in which like the operations team can handle what the seller's side can do, but then also early and often like identifying where the pitfalls in the deal could be and what could cause a delay. Like both those deals, that that solar should have been caught when the prelim came in. The down payment assistance, if I'm remembering correctly, we thought we were closing 3 or 4 days before the original close of escrow.
Absolutely.
And then it became on our radar. And I
Mm-hmm.
think both those things, with proper communication earlier, we could have closed sooner.
Yeah, and it's this whole thing. I mean, one of the biggest things we're trying to do in these new episodes as we've gone virtual is show you guys how the plane is flying while we're building it. And I think one of the biggest, we were even having a conversation about this today in terms of cash for keys. I think one of the biggest opportunities in our business is setting clear roles and responsibilities. I think part of the reason, and it's not the cause, but it's a symptom, is we have acquisitions team members reselling properties and acting as listing agents. We have listing agents who are also full-time coaches in our business. And it makes it difficult to then communicate as to what's the responsibility of the agent to handle as a real estate agent versus what's put back on the ops team. There needs to be a much clearer vision of who's responsible for what. And then that over communication needs to happen between everybody. It's the same thing when we look at acquisitions and operations. Each of us are our own departments, but there is absolutely a synergy and a communication line that it's a must. It needs to go back and forth. And that's not to say I'm overstepping and I need roles in acquisitions. And that's not saying you need to overstep and take roles in operations. They're two sides of the same coin, not two sides of separate coins. And so you're absolutely right. I think that's why I think one of the biggest opportunities for us is figuring out a better listing process. And that's a whole other subsection of the operational department in and of itself, but definitely some areas of opportunity to make these things go a lot smoother.
Yeah, and we're having issues on the wholesale side too, with wholesale deals not closing on time. And it's the exact same problem. Is, we have multiple people doing multiple things, and when you have that, you have less overall manpower versus one person who's dedicated to it. I think as somebody who has been a realtor and has done a decent amount of transactions, my subjective take is it is on the realtor that is getting paid to facilitate maximizing profit and closing the deal to handle that behavior. I think the transaction coordinator plays a role in also looking and being a resource and making sure that our ducks are in a row. But I think it is cross-departmental that we're having issues with deals closing. And ultimately, like you said, some of it's completely outside of our personal control. But there's also a lot of them where we should have known earlier that this was going to pop up.
For
right?
sure. Yeah.
Like on the purchase side, like, Liz pendants is popping up, lost note bonds, probates, things like that. Tenants, right? Tenants have been a huge reason for delays. All of that can be negotiated up front with a game plan. Like, hey, we'll buy it with, no tenant at this price. If the tenant does not vacate by this date, the price automatically starts dropping incrementally by this amount. Right? Like a per diem, right? Which I know we've used. Ultimately, it's a bad look when you have a consistent issue of not closing on time. It definitely shows poorly on the company. So I think you're right. Something about the spelling out of the roles and responsibilities.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a trickle down effect too, right? Like when we talk about these delays, when we're rolling private money from the sale of a property into the purchase of another, obviously our private money lender relationships, they're lending money to make a return. So, if a deal's taking a little bit longer than expected, that just means more money in their pocket. But it also, we don't want to be the ones to build a reputation with our private money lenders that all of our projects delay. Yes, it makes them more money, but then how organized does it really make us look? Especially with our existing relationships with title companies. When title's knocking on our door, the seller's knocking on our door. Hey, we're supposed to close on Friday. Today's Thursday. Where are the funds? Right? And so I think it's a trickle down.
Those are the worst calls.
Yeah, they are. And they're embarrassing calls to make too. And that's why I think, and I emphasize that one of the fixes. Yeah.
Well, I think we're both on the same page here. I want to literally map out the cost of this. Outside of reputational cost, we can calculate the dollar cost. Our average loan is what, 300,000?
Call it 300. Yeah.
We're paying interest only on these loans. Divide them by 365 days on the interest that you're paying annualized. How many days, if you were to, like, we're just kind of ballparking here, if you were to average the number of days beyond the close of escrow that you are banking on, how long do you think the average over escrow timeline is?
With our recent deals that were either selling or have just, at least I'd go 14 days, honestly. 14 days.
Okay. Per deal, 14. And we're looking to do 100 of these deals. That's $115,000 off of the profit line because of a couple days here, a couple days there.
Mm-hmm.
It's $83 a day per deal. I mean, it's not an insignificant amount of money.
No, not at all.
The question is then, like, could you hire somebody for $100,000 a year that could close deals more consistently, right? That's the question you have to ask yourself. Are we even taking the right approach by having somebody in-house list these, which helps because it does play a part in compensation packages. But at the end of the day, this is a very fucking important job. I don't think any realtor is going to take $100,000 to sell 100 homes. That's $1,000 a home. But that's on top of what we're already paying.
Yeah.
Right? So to me, it seems like a no-brainer that there should be somebody that has a clear role and responsibility that they treat a business giving them, we're not doing 100 flips, but say we're doing 50 flips, 50 flips exiting on average like 360,000 or whatever, or 400,000. I mean, it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
You could get a damn good agent in this market.
You're 100% right. 100% right. And I think, again, it's one of these things that's easy to brush under the rug. And I think there's a very fine line, and I'll kind of shift to this kind of broader vision of what this plays into, which is our cash flow forecast. Okay. Typically, we're looking at our cash flow forecast on a monthly basis. We have a Google spreadsheet of all 12 months in the year. It directly ties in and feeds information from our sales board that tells us all of the properties we're in escrow to buy, all of the properties we're rehabbing, all of the properties we are actively wholesaling, and then obviously our closed deals with revenue reflected. And so, again, it's easy to brush this under and look at this and say, okay, things didn't close in April, but we're for sure going to realize this money in May, so we'll catch up and do it. I think the issue with that is if you take that mindset 100% long enough, your business is probably not going to be in business very long because, again, there needs to be funds available when you're flipping properties. If you look, money pushed to May, okay, we'll see that money realized in May. That's great if the money's actually realized in May. But if all of these little gears that need tweaking aren't addressed, that issue is going to compound month after month after month. And then we're sitting here with an empty bank account going, where's all the money from our deals? Now, obviously, we have our business coach, which is Sharper Consulting. And we've usually beat ourselves up a lot when we see that money move over to the next month. And I think we're a little bit on the too rigid of a spectrum. The advice that we've gotten from Sharper is you need to look at these on a quarterly basis. Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. So if the money that we thought was coming in April didn't come in, and we think it's coming in May, great. Okay, we're still in Q2. We need to look at Q2 as its own thing. If something didn't close in April, great. We still want to realize that revenue in May. If something takes even longer, we want to realize that revenue in June. But we need to look at them on a quarterly basis. But I think if we just completely sweep things under and say, oh, okay, didn't close in April, we'll see if it closes in May, all these little tweaks that need to be made, I think the issues are just going to compound. And so that's a little bit of the things we're working through on just looking at this from the grand scheme of things. You and I take that zoomed out bird's eye view. You and I each have not only departmental KPIs to hit, but we're also running this business with a lot of our team members and obviously our CEO owner at the helm, where we're responsible for all these important KPIs. And not only are we responsible, we need to explain when there's discrepancies or why we're behind our goal or where that money is going to be realized further. And so I think just becoming more seasoned in how to shorten that cash conversion cycle, setting the right expectations, tweaking all the little gears here and there that need to be fixed, because in the perfect example you gave, $84 a day. And those days compound, and they compound very quickly. And we saw in a worst case scenario, that's over a 6-figure deficit just from letting deals take longer than they should be.
I mean, I tend to agree that we're too rigid on like the month by month.
Yeah.
Because, we use that analogy, like the business is never like that. It's always these ups and downs. I'm just brainstorming here. I mean, my biggest recommendation when projecting out cash flow is this isn't changing overnight. So you need to not put when the money will be realized as the contract date. You should put it as the historical data from the last 90 days. How long does it typically take when we sign a 21-day escrow? What it sounds like to me is you guys have taken a whole bunch of 21-day escrows and they've turned into 40-day escrows.
100%.
So there's no value to signing with that specific person.
And
so we should stop assigning value to a 21-day escrow.
I would agree.
I think the other part to this is most delays, on the sales side, come from the lending portion. I always recommend my clients to take local lenders because outside of they have better market knowledge and they have a better idea of how to handle issues when they pop up within our community, they also have reputational damage from failing to perform versus the guy in LA who's doing $20 million and really doesn't care if his $300,000 house doesn't close.
No.
So that's the other part. And then, the last part is really vetting the financial prowess of the borrower, right? I feel like this year we've had more people have issues with appraisals, with loan qualifications, and knowing who's the person that if we agree to your price, that's done. And that you can make that decision quickly, right? That the guy that has no extra money outside of what he offered, if everything goes right, that's the only way you can do this versus the guy that maybe offered $5,000 less, but if the appraisal comes in $10,000 under, he has the funds to make up the difference, right? Like we've had deals, like we had the deal in Modesto where we listed it for $415 and we got it. I think we even went a little over, and then the appraisal came in low, and they literally didn't have the funds to make up the difference. That is the definition of outside of our control. We read the market right. The buyer interest was there, but the lender's appraiser did not agree with our team. And we can't control that. And so knowing who the buyer is, and that's not on every deal. Not every deal this year gets multiple offers, right? We have stuff sit, and sometimes you have to take it. but I would not forecast it as closing on time if
No.
it's that important.
Well, and I mean, we've got one of our special project deals, one of our deals that's supposed to bring in, ideally we're going to be six figures or, a chunk of change more, where even in the contract, we have the close of escrow date to be the end of May. But we know if the closing date's set to the last day in May, what has history told us? That shit is not going to close in May, and the wire's not hitting our bank account in May. So even though on paper it's saying May 30th, the last business day in May, we know that's going to come in with probably 99% certainty due to some other factors as well, but 99% certainty that
It's
that
100%.
money, that money is going to be realized in June and not in May.
Can I bring up something? But that, like, I'm not even trying to toot my own horn, but even then, that was me as a representative for the company saying, this is what's being said on paper, but this is what I know to be true.
Yep.
Based on my negotiation with this person. Mm-hmm. So it's like, we need that level of knowledge and feedback if we're buying another deal. If we're banking on that 100,000+ plus all the money that we have in that deal coming back to use on another purchase, and you tell me we're buying a flip, we're going to use the funds from this project to buy this flip, I'm going to tell you, if it's closing, if it needs to close June 1st, it's not happening, dude. No. It's just not happening. You have to go another route. And so I think you've hit the nail on the head. Role responsibility plays a big part. Training plays a very big part. And there's a mix between what the acquisitions team is doing when we're buying these deals and then what the operations team is doing when we're liquidating them. Because at the end of the day, we have insider knowledge when we're buying them compared to you, and you have insider knowledge when you're selling them compared to me. So,
yeah. And it's the trickle down effect too. I mean, especially on fix and flips or wholesales or stuff that we're buying. I mean, the bottom line affects compensation for, the salespeople, because commission only salespeople aren't getting paid till the deal closes. Right. And so when we experience these delays, unfortunately, that trickles back to the acquisitions person who signed the deal. It's a literal domino effect. And I think this is not a wound that is going to be fixed by a Band-Aid. I think there's probably some substantial overhauls in some of our processes that need to be made. And honestly, I'm glad we're talking about this, because it's something I feel like the writing's been on the wall, but we've really never flushed out maybe some action items that may actually need to happen to improve these things. Not only we're in the middle of May. We're almost to the middle of the year in June. And at that point, we've only got 6 months left in the year. And then we've got goals, and we need to start goal setting for 2026 in Q3 of this year. And so what are some of these issues and items that need to be addressed? What are some of the systems and processes and roles and responsibilities that may need to be refreshed so that we're putting ourselves in a better position to finish out the year and hit our goals this year, but also put us in the best position to start off on the right foot in 26.
Yeah. And like I said, it's both sides. The wholesale and the fix and flip have had this issue. And, that should be writing on the wall enough. I mean, it doesn't matter how many deals you buy. I mean, you make money when you sell, yep. Right? So if I were to ask you this, I'm curious what you'd say. Are there any patterns where the deals go well on the sales side? Have you noticed any patterns on like, oh, that escrow is easy, it closed early, it was on time, or, it went exactly how we expected? Are there any patterns you notice?
One of the common themes is when there's an existing relationship between either our listing agent and the buyer's agent bringing the deal, or our listing agent and the lender for a particular buyer. When not just like oh cool, they're local, like you mentioned, ideally where you're always going with a local lender, but it's those pre-existing relationships. Because Scott, when if you were selling your house and I'm a licensed agent and I have a buyer that I'm bringing to you, because of our pre-existing relationship, I'm going to want to make sure not only do I do everything in my power to perform, I want to make sure my buyer performs. I have a fiduciary duty to my buyer, but there's that little also inherent thing there that because you and I have a pre-existing relationship, I will probably go more of the extra mile to make sure shit gets happen on time than if you and I didn't. And so, and again, it comes down to, what maybe shifts or changes can we make to our listing process to where we can do more deals with pre-existing agent and lender relationships? Because then everybody's got more skin in the game. Nobody wants to ruin, a pre-existing relationship or leave a bad taste in anybody's mouth. So that's been the common theme. And there's been a couple deals this year where I can think of where they went smoothly, and whether it was our listing agent or even me personally, I knew the agent bringing the buyer on the other side, or I knew the lender. And I'm not only going into it going, okay, I feel very comfortable about this. Oh, but look, the final end result was exactly how I was anticipating it was going to go. Smooth, done, ready to go.
It sounds like we came up to an answer.
I think so too.
And when I'm doing my transactions, because I still operate as a realtor here and there, I was just thinking about it while you're talking. I can't think of any of my escrows where they ran late. Oh, there was one, and it was the condo. And that was a unique circumstance in and of itself where the delay was known ahead of time. No, it really wasn't. It was clear to close. Now that I say it out loud, they got denied at clear to close. Outside of that, I can't think of any of my deals in the recent history where they went over. And I don't think it's because I'm legitimately amazing at my job or anything. I just think I had a different level of awareness about my responsibility in that role because I wasn't being torn apart by other stuff pulling me back. Because ultimately, like you mentioned, if we have an acquisitions agent listing a property, what's their main priority to the company?
Acquisition.
More deals.
Yep.
That's where they get their money. Same with a coach. If they have the responsibility and they're getting torn, they're going to get paid to be a coach more than to be an agent. And then I also think the full-time agent model, in my opinion, is just better. You look at big companies like Wedgwood. They aren't listing it within their own company. They're paying a discounted rate, right? And I think that's fair at volume, to high-producing agents that want 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 deals a year, even at a slightly different price, whose full-time responsibility is building those relationships, following up with lenders, making sure deals are closing on time. And it's less risky overall.
You're exactly right. And we literally had this conversation with one of our coaching students back at the Deal Champs event. This was probably a month ago, where, they had a family member who they were talking. They were like, yeah, we're thinking they're going to get licensed so they can list all the properties and we can, double dip and save here and save there. But I also want them to run this side of my business so I can focus on getting more deals. And what was our advice? Don't
pay
get
someone
licensed. No, if you're wanting them to take a role in the actual ownership and part of your business, you can't be giving them the listing agent hat and then now you want them to take this big side of your business. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. You want the right person in the right seat who's going to perform at the very best they possibly can.
I 100% agree. I think that will be where we end up in this conversation, is really, really clear responsibilities, because everybody only has 24 hours in a day. And how many listings do we have right now? How many active listings with agents?
I want to say 7 or 8.
So at any given point, you have 7 or 8 houses that you're selling for a company. There is no effing way that you can do anything else.
No.
But you can get really elite, right? So I think that seems to me like the resolution. And looking at the cost of not doing it, of $115,000 on top of what we're already paying, find a way to pay the other team members a compensation package that encourages them to do what they're best at. So if they're really good at coaching, you pay them in coaching. If they're really good at closing, you pay them for acquisitions. If they're really good at wholesaling, you pay them in dispo. You don't muddy the waters. Like, Cade, have you ever listed a house for the company?
No.
Neither have I. Why is that?
Because if we're going to list a house, it's going to eat away from the things we need to be spending our time on.
Exactly. And so if we're following that rule, then we should follow that rule for everybody in the company. And if somebody's compensation does not match, if you remove those listings, then we need to figure out how do we make it match? Because ultimately, each of these roles can get paid for their job. And especially if you take away 8 hours a week of listing agent behavior and you reinvest the 8 hours a week into your main strength, which is whatever it is, you will make more money because more deals will go through, and the deals themselves will make more money.
You're 100% right. There's an opportunity cost that hurts there. And then again, going back to, if we can shorten the cash conversion cycle and close deals quicker and more money in our pocket, and we can pour more into the people into their own respective lane and roll in position, I think overall it's a net positive, not only in dollar amounts towards the company, but into the culture, the morale, how each individual is performing in that role. It's an overall net positive across the board.
Yeah, I think overall, and it's simpler, like success of creating an efficient work experience that's optimized over time. Jenny may be yelling at me right now because I probably butchered that. But creating a job, when you look at corporate America, like, not saying that corporate America is where we want to be, but do they have people all over different areas in the business? They shouldn't. There should be departments that are pretty regulated. And we're a small business growing to a medium-sized business. If we want to go from a few million to tens of millions or hundreds of millions, this is not a scalable way of doing it.
No. And if not now, then when? Because the problem's only going to get exacerbated as we continue to get bigger. So,
yeah, I mean, look at my lead manager conversion. It's way harder when you're already doing, 10 deals a month to switch how you run your sales process.
You're 100%.
I mean, you could look at it as we're already doing, 50 transactions a year. But when that gets to 400, right? Like, it's way harder to now switch what you're doing.
100%, dude. Well,
shoot, man.
There it is. There it is, dude. We opened up with my poor golf game, but exceptional drinking skills, and we just gave a 101 on all the shit we need to fix in part of the operational side of the business, dude. But I think it's good. I think this discussion, we've had bits and pieces of this discussion sporadically. I think not only is content for our listeners and viewers and all that, I hope this is bringing value, but I think just the inherent value of you and I having this 48-minute conversation that we probably wouldn't have otherwise had, and that writing on the wall would have continued to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Very happy that we went through this, and everybody who tuned in, thank you guys for listening, and we'll plan to see you guys on the next episode of the Pursuit of Property podcast.
See you later.